Salvete spectatores, today we are going to take a look at Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. One of the few games made by the legendary developer Troika Games, Bloodlines is one of the only two games set in the World of Darkness universe that aren't cringe dogshit. It actually is one of the best games ever made and even today has a loyal fanbase and active modding scene.
Boah, geil. Oh. Ey Leute, ich sag euch, ich hab grad so einen Prügel in der Hose.
And I too feel a great sense of nostalgia when playing it, though I was only 2 years old when it released. But before we can try to explain just what makes Bloodlines this great, we first have to examine the universe that is set in. If your father has abandoned you, you generally like any form of degeneracy, or have colored hair, you will fit right into the World of Darkness universe. Here cutting yourself and hating your parents makes you one of the cool kids, and might just also make you eligible to join a secret vampire society that governs over humankind from the shadows. Vampires in the World of Darkness universe are descendants of Cain, who in this universe got punished for killing his brother Abel by being given superpowers. From him, 13 main bloodlines of vampires emerged that all have special abilities and disadvantages. You have furries, maniacs, vampire sluts, and some real edgy cringe shit. Besides those vampire clans, there also exist 3 big vampire sects. The Camarilla, who are enforcing the Masquerade, an ideology whose goal it is to keep the vampiric curse a secret, and who are meddling in everybody's business. The Anarchs, who also are interested in upholding the Masquerade, but totally not because you told them to. And the Sabbat, who don't give a fuck about anything and think that furniture made out of homeless people is quite stylish. Our story begins when our protagonist gets an STD of the special kind and gets turned into a vampire, of one of 7 clans between which you can choose during character creation. But instead of pillow talk, we only get a stake in our heart, before being dragged off to some Camarilla court where we are almost executed, and are only saved by the Anak leader Knight Rodriguez speaking up. The Camarilla prince Sebastian Lacroix then decides to spare us instead, as a sign of his goodwill, and sends us on a suicide mission to die somewhere else. We first get sent to Santa Monica, which apparently is a real shithole. Here we are supposed to meet with Mercurio, Lacroix's ghoul, who failed to acquire explosives needed for our task to blow up a warehouse used by the Sabbat. So now we have to get the explosives from the thugs who ripped off Mercurio instead.
Thugs.
But we still can't complete our mission, because the Nosferatu Bertram, who is supposed to show us a way to the warehouse, is in hiding because he's in a blood feud with Therese Vorman, the Baroness of Santa Monica. So now we have to run some errands for Therese to get her to call off the feud. These errands include driving out a ghost from a hotel. This Oceanside Hotel mission is probably the creepiest horror level in a non-horror game, and there even is a cheat code for skipping it if you are a little game journalist. But because you're not only dealing with a woman, but also a vampire, things aren't as straightforward, and you stumble into a conflict between Therese and her sister Jeanette, who both try to play you. Their questline not only teaches you to question the motives of characters, but also to take notice what clan they belong to, and what this might tell you about them. After a big reveal, Therese and Jeanette actually were manifestations of our protagonist's innermost desires all along. We get to choose our favorite anime waifu and can finally meet Bertram, who then brings us to the warehouse. Santa Monica is basically the tutorial region that teaches us how vampire society and the quest design works. After we blow up the warehouse, we go to downtown where the prince gives us a new assignment. Finding out what happened to the freighter Elizabeth Dane and the Ankaran sarcophagus that was on board. That Ankaran sarcophagus is believed to either hold some ancient skeleton or an antediluvian, a 3rd generation vampire who probably would be very hungry when he awakes and would bring on Gehenna, the vampire apocalypse. For the rest of the game you will be hunting down that sarcophagus, as every faction has some interest in it. There will be lots of intriguing and you will be played. It is important to figure out what each person's interest is. Luckily there are loads of half-baked, very non-subtle chess metaphors all throughout the game that basically tell you everything. On your mission you will meet all kind of interesting characters. An enlightened redditor.
Oh, I really wish I had. All this speculation about the sarcophagus containing an antediluvian and being a portent of Gehenna is making me cringe. These are the kinds of ridiculous, superstitious assumptions I came here to debunk.
A Discord mod.
Huh? Tango?
You came to the wrong place for dance lessons. Yeah, I forgot you're Malkavian, eh? You got more than a few bugs in the software, right? Yeah, sorry, but that's a tech problem I can't fix.
A Discord kitten.
Isn't this better? You and me alone, for just a little while. Away from jihad and the nonsense, and the dangers, just the two of us. I don't want to spoil the moment, but there's a reason I needed to speak to you alone. Let's. Yes. Well, moving on.
Braune Leute.
Welcome to Fat Larry's Trucker Mag. I am the proprietor and salesman of the month several years in a row. The ladies call me, oh God, but you can call me Fat Larry with a F-A-T, cause there's more of me to love.
Just to name a few. Almost all of them are great and memorable. They aren't great because they depict real people in any way, however. Instead, they're insane caricatures, and all of the vampires you meet seem to come right out of some self-insert fanfiction of a 14-year-old girl. It is amazing cringe. The quest design in Bloodlines is great. They for the most part aren't your typical fetch quests. Instead, they are all quite unique and memorable. Even after replaying the game for the 5th time for this video, I still kept doing all the side missions, even though I already had enough footage of them. They have a great replayability. Let's just take a look at the first quest you are given by Mercurio. Get the astrolite back from the thugs. You can just charge right in and kill all of them. This, however, may be hard to do for some characters who haven't invested into combat skills early on. An alternative way of getting the astrolite is talking your way in. You can persuade, seduce or intimidate the guard in front to let you in. You can also use the domination skill to order him to let you in, or drive him completely nuts with the dementation skill. Once inside, you can trick the boss into giving you the astrolite without you having to pay for it if your skill is high enough, or alternatively you can just pay for the astrolite. Finally, you can also be sneaky and break a part of the fence, then sneak around the house, break the generator to lure one of the guards outside so that the boss is isolated and can be dealt with silently. But beware, they also have a guard dog. One of the only 2 dogs in the entire game, by the way. Then inside there also are some things hidden, like Mercurio's money in this vent. And there also is some more background information on the characters and whatever is going on the PC, but you need a high enough hacking skill to be able to see that. Side missions generally are as good and interesting as the main story, if not more. Uncover the horrors of a crazy doctor who harvests body parts from his victims in order to make some real high-level prosthetics. Hunt down the last survivor of a paranormal investigation crew that got a bit more paranormal activity than they asked for. Or destroy a secret doomsday cult of vampires that try to spread some kind of super AIDS amongst the homeless. The side missions all have this kind of creativity. They fit quite neatly in the overall world, so that when I was originally trying to summarize the story in more detail, I kept feeling the need to include this or that side quest, because they are all so amazing, and because they were so good and interesting that I thought they were part of the main story. Now, whilst there are many ways to approach a task in Bloodlines, eventually combat will become unavoidable. And goddammit is it mediocre. Whilst not bad directly, it is repetitious. Like in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, the combat largely consists out of right-clicking enemies to death and using the same 2 abilities over and over again. The ranged combat doesn't feel good. It takes ages to aim, and even on the highest level, you won't be able to shoot very precisely. The game obviously wasn't intended to be played as a shooter. But the melee combat also doesn't seem to have been the intended way. It feels a bit better, though be it less engaging. But some parts, especially later in the game, when you have to fight enemies with machine guns, are just so much harder with a melee character than with a ranged character. I mean, it's probably somewhat realistic that a madman with a shovel would lose if he just charged right into a group of heavily armed soldiers, but come on, that isn't very fun. Then there's also this part with burning enemies that will set you on fire and deal lots of damage to you when you touch them. As a melee character, you're just fucked. It is even the kind of damage that heals super slowly, so just grab yourself a cup of tea and a good book and wait till you have some health again. As a ranged character, this section is a complete joke. All of the enemies die in 2 shots and have no chance of ever getting near you. Melee characters also have a much higher resource drain and need a lot more blood than ranged characters. Blood, however, is in short supply in most combat areas. Luckily, almost all of the combat sections are rather short. There is, however, the Nosferatu sewer. I hope you enjoy beating up a bunch of special needs kids in the sewers for 2 hours and having to suck on 30 plus rats to at least get some blood back.
You rat sucker!
Yeah, everybody hates this section, and it doesn't even play a role in the overall story, so the unofficial patch with which I played, by the way, just lets you skip it. I mean, come on, there's this boss fight with this weird abortion monster, and after you beat it, they just use it as a generic enemy in the following hallways. But enough of that. Melee builds only feel good if you have strong ranged abilities that can compensate for your shortcomings. Now this sounds very dramatic, but the combat actually isn't hard at all. It just feels unnecessarily cheesy if you have a bad build. So let's just have a quick look at the available clans and their abilities. Pruja are rebels and tankies. Many of them are Anax, and they generally are very cringe.
I'm Damsel. Someone talking shit about me over in that ivory tower? Who said it, huh? I'll kick their ass!
Their skills aren't very interesting. They can make themselves stronger, faster, and can debuff enemies. They aren't really worth playing, because they don't have any special dialogue options on top of the boring abilities. Gangrel are basically furries. They can make themselves tankier, but also have access to Animalism and Protean Discipline. Animalism gives you one ability that distracts enemies, one that stuns them and does a bit of damage, a ranged damage spell, and on the highest level a spell that summons an insect swarm that will eat anything on your screen. Protean lets you put on your fursuit and sell feed pics for a progressively higher price. Gangrel are pretty fun combat-wise, but there are some more interesting choices if you are new to Bloodlines. Toreador are vampire sluts and it girls.
Don't kill me! I'm not one of the Setites. I'm from Clan Toreador.
Prove it. Who are Cry Cry Cry?
You mean the American band Cry Cry Cry? Aren't they that acoustic trio that even though they're all songwriters only does covers of songs by other groups and performs the most depressing?
Yeah, they are pretty cringe, but if you want to go for a seduction build, their abilities are as boring as their characters. They can improve their sight, speed, and can debuff enemies. Now we get to the more interesting choices. The Ventru are vampire aristocracy. They are the leaders of the Camarilla and think they are too good to sucker Fortis guys or rats. They can debuff enemies. This ability is so fucking boring. It is completely useless and I never used it, because the enemies aren't strong enough and the game isn't hard enough that it would be worth wasting skill points on this ability. They can also make themselves tankier, and they have access to the Dominate discipline. They can force people to dance, can make them fight for you, or can just straight up force them to kill themselves. Yeah, pretty badass stuff. You can also use this in conversation instead of persuasion, intimidation or seduction. So they are overall pretty cool to play. Tremere, however, are even cooler. They are basically blood wizards. They not only have access to Dominate, but also to Taumaturgy. They can steal their enemies' blood, make them vomit blood, or can make their blood boil. Yeah, pretty fucking cool. Tremere are probably the ideal clan to play on your first run. Then there are the two most interesting clans, Malkavians and Nosferatu. Malkavians are crazy vampires. They have completely unique dialogue because Malkavian characters are kind of prophetic and keep spoiling the story. And generally they only talk in riddles. Sometimes I accidentally made some NPCs mad at me because I didn't understand what I was trying to say to them. You also have the ability to infect other people with your craziness and dialogues. There, for example, is this one encounter with a person who knew you before you were turned into a vampire, and you have to persuade her that she's mistaking you for someone else. As a Malkavian character, you can convince her that you actually are her pet turtle that she had as a child.
Shelly? Holy crap, you got big! I'm sorry I flushed you, I thought you were dead.
You will also have a conversation with the TV, and a discussion with a stop sign. If you pre-ordered Bloodlines 2 years ago, you will also get a stop sign item as an homage to this. Man, I can't wait for Bloodlines 2. Malkavians have access to Dementation, the crazy ability. It more or less works like Dominate. Make people laugh hysterically, make them turn on their allies, force them to kill themselves. The highest level skill randomly gives everybody around your target these effects. Crazy unpredictable ability for a crazy vampire. Then they have Obfuscate. Become invisible for a short amount of time. On the earlier levels this gets interrupted if you move or interact with anything, but later on you can just sprint past almost every enemy. This discipline completely breaks the game. Even the normal sneak ability is stupid enough. Nosferatu are your classical horror vampires. They are so hideously ugly that many NPCs won't interact with you, or at least will insult you.
What the? Oh, jeez, look at you. Now wait. I know most people, they can't accept you because of your uniqueness, but I understand. My sister's a freak. Allie the crocodile girl, she's in a traveling circus around the Midwest. That poor, sweet, wonderful, scaly girl. Listen, do you need a hug?
Even just being seen by people on the street is a Masquerade violation, so the intended way for Nosferatu to get around is through the sewers. But you can also just Naruto run past people. The special interactions with people are just super fun, and you will have to find a new approach on some quests. So Nosferatu are just great to play if you want to experience Bloodlines in a new way, but they are a bit harder for new players. They have access to animalism and the obfuscate disciplines. The different playstyles that come with the different clans and the unique dialogues some of them have give Bloodlines a huge replayability, which is helped by Bloodlines not being a very long game. I just couldn't stop myself from playing Bloodlines over and over again and checking out every clan and playstyle for this video. I encountered some bugs, but they were never game breaking. The power lines became overly excited from time to time, and a couple of time objects would be randomly replaced by other objects. One time I gained the ability to shoot bullets out of my hands. Cool stuff. As I said, I played with the unofficial patch, which fixes a whole lot of problems. And even recovered some quest lines that were cut out. But I will talk about this and a couple of other big mods in a separate video that will come out in 1 or 2 weeks. All elements of the game we've talked about until now make Bloodlines a good game. But there are many good games and you have only so much time. But there's something else about Bloodlines. Its ambience is unique and makes you feel like you really are in the year 2004 in a rundown LA dealing with the scum of the world. And it not only feels super comfy, but also gives you an intense feeling of nostalgia. In my case, for a time that I didn't even experience myself. It is hard to pinpoint what exactly causes this, but it has to be a mixture of the great writing, the overall look of the game, and the amazing soundtrack. My god, is the music great. The environmental themes feel so right, and I especially love the Chinatown theme. Then there are the obnoxious tracks that play in all the nightclubs you visit throughout the game. I just love it. Bloodlines is one of the best games ever made. Almost all of its elements are perfect, and it managed to weave these elements together better than any other game. Bloodlines is more than the sum of its parts, and everybody needs to have played it at least once.
Don't come back until you do. Good evening.